and for our final lesson, we're going to take our high poly geometry that we have here. And before we use the high poly, what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the low poly top layer, and we're going to build out this top part with a bit of a different not orientation, but a bit of a different flow. Right now it seems pretty normalized, and we want to introduce the blend shapes, which we're going to focus more in depth in future lessons, but we just wanted to include it as part of the overview here for concept massing. So I'm going to duplicate actually the entire low poly group over, and I'm going to just scale that out so we have something to look at. Or I'm just going to delete it actually. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to take this top, not the entire thing, we're going to remove the whole underside from this. So I'm going to go ahead and just shift this over some. And we know how much we put it over, we can always bring it back, because since the group has its own translations, when I grab just the geometry, we're still at 0. And if it wasn't, you can always go up to modify freeze transformations. That way when we move it over and we want to get it back, we know that we moved it over minus 100, and we can just move this over minus 100 if we'd like. So I'm going to go to my face, and I'm going to go to the left viewport. And I'm going to grab all of those guys. I actually need to show the cameras here. I'm going to select my, where is the left? I'm going to grab the camera here. Under the view, if we select the first button, it's going to select our current camera. And I'm going to change because right now the clipping plane is off. Oh, well, interesting. It wasn't letting me select a second ago. Well, okay. If we wanted to change the clipping plane, we could here. If we just select that and then go to the attribute editor by hitting Control A, we can change the near clipping plane and the far clipping plane here. So I'm going to grab all those and deselect the ones below that and go back up to my perspective. Great. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to just shift select over all of this to basically unselect what we had and select everything else, and I'm just going to hit delete. And so what we're going to do is we're going to stitch this back up with a pen to polygon tool. Great. So now we're going to use this, and we're going to keep the creases on it, and we're going to basically smooth this out. We're going to go up to mesh, smooth, and I'm just going to hit that a couple of times. And so we're going to delete the history, and I'm going to freeze the transformations, and I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to freeze them again. And I'm going to make a copy of this on top of itself. I'm going to Control D, and I'm going to go to my vertex. I'm going to highlight all the vertices, and I'm going to go up and make sure that we're on absolute transform. And on the Y, I'm just going to type 0. I'm just going to think about it for a second. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to use, I might have made this a little bit too high poly. I'm going to delete the creases, remove all creases, same thing here. And I'm going to delete the history one more time. And so we're going to make a blend shape from here to here. And what a blend shape is going to let us transform from one state of the geometry to the other state. And so what we want is, in this instance, I mean, blend shapes are, we're going to get into blend shapes more in depth in the future, but in this instance, sometimes you want the geometry to stay in the position that it's at. In this case, we want this flat plane to move up to this plane, because we're going to use another mesh that we're going to wrap to it, using the wrap deformer, and we're going to bring it up with it. So we're going to just go through this kind of quickly, but we're going to go up to Window, and then Animation Editors, and go down to Blend Shape, and you'll get a window that looks like this. And what we're going to do now is we're going to select the top and then the bottom, and we're going to go over to our Animation module, and under Create Deformers, we're going to do Blend Shape. And so now you see when you grab the blend shape with a little slider, the geometry transitions from one to the other. It morphs from one to the other. And that's what we want. And the reason the order selection matters, it's if you want something to go from the flat state to the deformed state, you want to select where it's going to and then where it's coming from. So that's why we selected it's going to this from this. Great, so now that we've done that, what we're going to do is go in and identify, I'm going to hide this and get this out of the way for a second. And I'm going to go in Plan. So I'm going to go to my top viewport. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new, like this just looks a little bit too normalized. So I'm going to make a new polygon here by going to the hotbox, mesh, and then create polygon tool, and I'm going to hold V for my vertex snap, and I'm just going to go corner to corner. Okay. And so now that we have this, instead of hitting smooth and getting normalized subdivisions here, we're going to want to figure out where we want the tightest areas. We're going to set up our own flow. So we're going to use this by using the split polygon tool and the insert edge loop tool. So I'm going to grab the insert edge loop tool and just insert a couple of edges here. And so we know that the one point, the peak is here because you can see the little star, and then there's another one here. And so what I want to do is I want to have edges come in and then fan away from them and then come back towards them and then fan away again. And so when we start adding these edges and we hit 3, we're going to be able to get a slight kind of sense of what that's going to look like. And so for now I'm going to add another edge here. And so right now I'm going to grab the vertices and I'm going to scale them away from each other. So I'm going to insert another edge, insert edge loop tool. I'm going to grab these vertices and I'm going to scale them in towards each other. And we're going to do this a couple of times with a couple of different edges as well. If we want to just lock this down, we can put in a layer and just call it temp so that we don't mix the selections up, and just template it or reference it. And so here we have this point here, which we want to fan out of. So those will be spread out, and then these are going to be spread in, and we're going to move these down over here. And so here we're going to tighten this one up. I'm going to insert another edge here, grab those vertices, tighten those up. And so you can start to get an idea here of what this is actually doing. So if we hit 3, we can start to see what the initial geometry orientation is starting to be. And when we smooth this out, it's just going to intensify that effect much more. So we can insert another edge there, scale those in, a bit. If you wanted to put an edge here, you could, but that's just going to make that tighter here. And so you could put another one this way and select all of these and scale them out like so. And this is a pretty fun and kind of interesting way to start getting your own, start working on your own kind of custom patterns that you're going to want to start setting up. And I'm going to go back to my perspective viewport. And so we start to get an idea here of what we're getting. And so I'm going to delete the history on this guy. And if we just duplicate this over, and I just have a look at what we start to get, we can say, okay, well, we know that this is just going to get more intensified as we smooth it. And if we start to smooth it, we can see what I mean by that. So it might pinch a little bit too much if you keep these too tight. But you can see that we've now set up the geometry, the grid, with a custom pattern based on us defining what the primary edge conditions are. So of course this isn't perfect. I mean, there's a couple areas that are just probably way too small. But you know, referencing back to the concept idea and concept massing here, the idea is to pump stuff out kind of quickly. And this is a great way to start to get an idea of what those, what the geometry will behave like. So here it was too tight, and we kind of shot out a bit past the mesh here. I'm going to make sure we don't do that. We can just move that one over a little bit more if we really want. We can space these out a bit more. And so that's probably fine. We'll just work with this one that we have here. And I'm just going to delete that one and snap this one over. Great. Okay, so I'm going to keep a duplicate of this, a low poly version over here. And I'm going to smooth this a couple of times by going to the hotbox, mesh smooth. And just trying to keep an idea of the scale that we have here. We don't really have a scale necessarily, but just thinking about how much, what size we want to kind of keep these guys at. And probably that's either this level, because we can end up smoothing this again at some point, or we can do one more if we really want to. Because part of the idea here is going to be we're going to work with some of these edges and maybe start peeling some of these up as well. But anyways, so we'll work with that one with this level here. And you got to keep in mind the blend shape that you are going to use. It can't be low poly. It has to be high poly, because if it's going to work by basically matching these, the wrap is going to match those vertices to the vertices of this mesh. And if it's low resolution, then it's going to match it to the jagged level 1 displays like these. So anyways, now that we have that set up, so we know we have these two, so let's just go ahead and hide this one. We can put that in the temp as well. Actually, no, we're going to put that one in the temp and remove this one from the temp. Sorry, this one from the temp. And so now that we've done that, we can very clearly see which one's which. And so the way this is going to work is you want to select, and this is the opposite in this instance, you want to select the one you're going to wrap to the one you're wrapping to. So in this case, and we don't want the blend shape to be all the way down, because then we can either use the outliner and select them, but we can pull it up a bit. So here we know that this is going to be new pattern. So you could select it with the outliner like so. But then this one here is in this group, so we're going to remove that one. This outer, we're going to drag it out. And so now we have outer and new pattern. And so before you make the wrap, before you create the wrap, so I'm selecting both of these, you want to make sure that the blend shape is all the way down. And we're going to go up to create deformers, and under wrap, we're going to open the dialog box and make sure exclusive bind is turned on. It's going to not be when you first open it. Turn exclusive bind on and hit create. And now when we go to pull up the blend shape, we can see what's happening here is we're actually morphing that pattern. So if I hide the blend shape, if I hide the blend shape here, we can see our swirl pattern that we created, and maybe this part here was should have been a little bit more fanned out. It was too tight to that area. This and this. Probably something like that. Yeah, I'm gonna delete that one. And it's fine, I'm just gonna grab this one, duplicate it over, and just snap it over again. Pull the blend shape up to get it out of the way. Smooth this a couple times. I think we did 3. Deleting the history, and then same thing, make this one new pattern, because the other one we just deleted. And then grab the new pattern, then the outer, pull it all the way down, create the formers, wrap, and then pull it up all the way. And so now we can see it's a lot nicer here. I mean, yeah, it's not perfect yet, but the geometry fans away from the intenser moments here, and then swoops back around. So it's pretty nice. What we're going to do now is we're going to take that geometry over and we're going to duplicate it. So that way, when you duplicate it, now it's been removed from the wrap and the blend shape. The blend shape and the wrap will continue to do their thing here. And we're going to bring this one over, and I'm snapping it down over to here. So now we have it on top of the high poly version. And I'm going to freeze the transformations. I'm going to hide it. And to remove this whole top layer, which is what we're going to do, there's a couple of things that we can use to set this up. We can either just literally offset this up a little bit and create a second layer, which could be fine. Or we can extract this chunk here, double click the face next to it. And we can do that one instead if you'd like, whichever one, either way. And then go up to mesh. So we need to go to the hotbox because we have our animation module up. Make sure that under edit mesh, keep faces together is turned on, and then go to extract. And so you can see here that this extracted the geometry here, this little chunk. And we need to do the same thing for this little edge here. So we're going to shift and double click next to it. It's going to select the whole way around and hit G for extract. So now that it extracted both of those, there's nothing that's binding these two top and bottom pieces together. So we're going to go back over to mesh and then separate. And we can either delete, oh, we forgot this part here. So I'm going to grab that edge that I just had, double click that edge, and just walk around. Or you can select the first edge and go all the way to the last edge and shift double click. Basically we want to just detach this whole top surface. There's a couple of continuity issues here. So we're going to extract that little chunk right there first. And then we're going to go back over and grab that face and find the moment where it pulls over. Oh, right here. Shift double click, because you see here it doesn't know which direction it's going to go. It swoops down or goes up. So we're going to select that one, select this one, and then come all the way across, double click that end, and then the last one, which would be this end. I think that's already extracted. I'm going to extract one more time here. And then we know we have from here over to right here. We can see that then it comes, that swoop comes again. So I'm going to shift double click, select that one, select the one next to it, and just come over to the end here. And extract that. And then I'm going to grab this end, follow it along to here, shift double click, select the next one, so, and then that's already extracted from that point. So I'm going to hit extract again, and then now we can go to mesh, separate, and we can see that now they're disconnected. So I'm going to, if we want to keep it, we can move it out of the way or put it in a layer. This can be HP top original pattern. Just hide that and then display show all. And we can see that the top, our new swirl, is now in that position. So what we want to do before we do that, I'm going to select all the ones that we just extracted and then go over to mesh, combine, and then delete all the history. Great. So now that we have that layer here, and it's fine. I mean, they're going to line up because of the bounding area is the same, but it's not going to have the same number of vertices, and that's okay because we're already done smoothing it, and we don't need to interpolate any more information here. And so here, now we can assign it a different material. We can see pretty much what it looks like all together. And if we wanted to take this, I'm going to duplicate a copy over. If I'm going to select all these edges, if I wanted to do something with these edges, I'm just going to select, I'm holding shift and double clicking all these edges across. We can create a selection set here. Make sure you're not selecting anything under. When you miss and you're still clicking, sometimes you probably pick something else. But in our case, since we're separated, we don't have anything else below it, so it's not a big deal. So I'm just going to select all those. We'll go up to create, sets, quick select set, and we'll just label this pattern selection. Great. And so what we want to do now is we want to use these edges to detach the components, meaning we're basically going to detach all along these edges so that we end up with basically stripes, more or less. And we're going to do that by going into the edit mesh and detach component. And you can see a little bit of kind of flickering just happen. And that's just basically, if you try to hit 3 now, you can see that like there's still a little bit of a kink here. If we were to separate all of these right now, if I just did separate, you can see we'd have access to each one of these individually. So right now it's still combined. So we're going to go to mesh, separate, and I'm going to isolate all of these. And so if we center our pivot first, we can actually begin to use the scale tool to begin to move these guys around a bit. But what we want to do is actually extrude. So if I go to extrude and I do an offset of 1, 1's way too much. So if I do an offset of like 0.25, yeah, 0.25 maybe is fine. 0.3. Let's see what 0.5 looks like. Okay. So we just extruded all of those, all of these faces now that we can either pull up And because there's gaps between them, if we're going to want to extrude these, so I'm going to undo that. Undo that a couple of times. Okay, so I'm going to extrude it again, and we're going to want to increment the extrude at this time because we want to create, I'm going to offset it by like 0.2 first, or 0.1 maybe. And because we're going to extrude it one more time, I just hit extrude again for G, and I'm going to do 0.2 this time. And so what we've done now is you can see that we've created kind of, it's tightening up this pattern here. And so before we go up, if we just pull up a little bit and hit extrude again, and then pull up a bit more, and then we hit extrude one more time, and we pull up a little bit, and then we hit extrude one more time, and then we offset in, so if we do 0.2, or not 0.2, 0.1, or 0.05, and then pull it up a little bit, and we have a look at what this looks like. We have a pretty interesting kind of rippled pattern, and if I hit 3, if I select these, you can see that we start to actually reveal the underside here, which is pretty nice. I mean, that's one of the great things about setting up your own pattern, is that you can pretty much define any specific kind of parameters, I guess you could say, on how you want to approach this. And right now I selected all these. They're not combined, and they're not merged, certainly. So if we just look at what we have right now, we have a pattern that's based on the influence points, which are these two, that fan away from them and then get tight again. So it's pretty nice, and it's nice and clean. It's great for concept massing. If we wanted to, we can delete the history. We could combine these by going over to Mesh, Combine. And if we combine these, it's going to tell me that it's going to be heavy to try to smooth all this out, which of course it is. If you want to keep the ripples here, you can. But if you wanted to merge it, then you could do Merge. And then in this case, we'd want to make sure that we check, go to Normals, and then Conform. And delete the history. And now if we hit 3 again, you notice that now we have the ripples, but we don't have the gaps between them. So if we turn this back on, we can't actually see into it. So it's up to you whether you want it to have that nice little separation. You can always put a clear piece of material under it. So if I undo that, and you can just keep it like this if you'd like to be able to see partially into it. And then of course you could do a similar pattern on the underside too. But you know, you can experiment around with a lot of these different techniques. You know, from a certain pattern you don't really notice it. It's kind of more-ish. And it starts to open up as you move around it and away from it. So here we are. This is the end of our lesson, and I hope you guys had a great time. You know, we started with the idea of the sketch and had some high poly, low poly techniques that we worked with. Covered quite a bit of ground, and hopefully with this you'll be able to create your own concept massings with no issues at all. Cool. So hope you guys had fun, and we'll see you guys in some of the upcoming lessons. We have a full range of topics that we're going to be covering in future lessons. Some more in-depth techniques on some concept ideas, as well as developing surface articulations, a lot of work with dynamics, and we're going to have a lot of fun. So hope you guys enjoyed, and here's our little output. Thank you.